Welcome to the week 4 lecture. This is the last of the 4-part lecture series in SOC 365, and it is the third part of the 3-part lectures on the theorists in the classical social theorists. So welcome and congratulations to making it to week 4. So today what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about two of the theorists about whom you're going to be reading this week, Sigmund Freud and Thorstein Veblen. So the first theorist I'd like to discuss is Sigmund Freud. Just because there's a saying in psychology that a little psychology is a dangerous thing. Now, Freud was a psychologist, but he was also touching on social psychology, and a lot of his theory applies to sociology as well as to social psychology, which is the marriage of sociology and psychology. Psychology studies the individual for the most part. Sociology studies group behavior. Socius means community or comradeship, and psyche means soul. So the differences between psychology studying the individual and sociology studying group behavior, but social psychology looks at how the individual influences society and how society influences the individual. So Freud was kind of bridging the gap between the two disciplines, which really have a very large overlap. So that's one of the reasons we're going to be talking about Sigmund Freud. So let's take a look at some of what's kind of the nutshell version of what Freud was, what you're going to be reading this week about Freud. Freud's probably best known for identifying that humans have unconscious processes, and this is critical to his understanding of human individuals in society. Okay? Freud theorized that individuals are largely driven by their unconscious minds. Now, think about what the general public talks about when we talk about Freud. Of course, they're thinking of sexuality. It comes up again and again. I hear people talking about it. It's like, wasn't he some sort of, people who don't know much about Freud will think he was like kind of the Dr. Ruth of the legitimate psychological theorists. And it's like, no, he talked about sexuality, but he talked about it as part of the larger human being who has needs, wants, and what tempts us, what part of us is telling get those basic needs fulfilled, whether it's food or water or sex or whatever it is, and then part of us is saying, no, you're part of a larger society, and the group you need to behave a certain way, even if it means you can't have immediate gratification. So let's take a look at what Freud was really saying. So Freud theorized that individuals are largely driven by their unconscious minds. So he said all individuals have 3 aspects of self. The first is the id, and that's our unconscious drive for immediate gratification of our desires. Okay, I'm hungry, there's some food, I'm going to eat it, no matter to whom it belongs. Okay, I just want it. I'm hungry. Now, the ego is our conscious effort, or our conscious self, which functions to balance the unconscious drive with the immediate gratification that the id wants, with the demand made by the demand made by the superego. I'll get to that in a minute. So the id and the ego are always in conflict with each other. Okay? The superego is our internalized culture, our morality, and it can produce guilt. Okay, it's kind of like the parental voice in there telling you what's right. It gives reasons why the ego is right in curbing the id. So the superego is tied to self-evaluation, including our feeling good for doing what is right. Most people have regrets in life. They have things for which they will kick themselves later. You know, sometimes we didn't have the knowledge we do now, and we don't give ourselves credit for that. Sometimes we don't take responsibility enough. But yeah, it's what is enough. Yeah, what produces guilt is a product of culture as well. So feeling that our actions influence other people's lives is kind of the realm of the superego, which is trying to say, okay, I have to preserve my own sense of self, my feeling good about myself. I have to be able to look myself in the mirror in the morning, and do what is right. I have to be able to live with myself. Okay. Freud believed human existence is embedded within a tension between the need for bonding, love, and an instinct for death. Okay, you're going to be reading more about this this week, but I wanted to kind of focus on what Freud called the pleasure principle. The mind has a strong tendency toward that pleasure principle. And the pleasure principle is the mind functioning in ways to ensure that the final outcome of an event will be pleasurable rather than not. So we attempt to maximize good feelings and sensations and minimize bad feelings and sensations. We all know somebody who is, goes into a situation, maybe pessimistic, say, and then said, if I expect too much, I'll be disappointed. I think we've all done that. We go into a situation expecting things to be so-so, and hey, it turned out to be great. And maybe feel sad if it didn't, or bad or angry if it didn't turn out that way. So, I can't believe I paid for that movie. It was terrible. Or, wow, that was really money well spent. I enjoyed myself. It was worth the 2 hours of my life to watch it. So step back, and that's a very general example, but the pleasure principle is the mind functioning in ways to ensure that the final outcome of any social event will be pleasurable rather than not. Okay, so let me back this up for 1 minute and continue with Freud. While nature and the body can never be fully controlled to end human suffering, Freud believed that suffering can be reduced by social regulations and what he called progress in society. He also said that, ironically, the social regulations that protect us can also cause much of our suffering because they are at odds with our most basic desires generated from the id. So you can really see that bridge, that he wasn't just within the realm of psychology. He really did bridge that gap. He was looking at things from a social psychological perspective. He was looking at how does the individual fit in society, influence society, and be influenced. Okay, now I'm ready to go on to Torsten Veblen. And just to make life a little bit interesting, it's also written with an H, Thorstein. I've seen a couple of different spellings of his first name. His last name, Veblen, you can you can pretty well bet that you got the right person. Okay, Torsten Veblen. And if you look at the years, again, we're dealing with that classical social period. Now, he lived longer than the other theorists we've discussed, except for Sigmund Freud, who lived to 1939. So you can see that, again, think about what he saw. He saw those interwarriors, at least the first half of them. He saw that roaring 20s, and prior to that, he saw, this incredible advance of pure capitalism without the restraints of policy that protected, a lot of those policies that protect the poor now, that you say, no, you cannot send somebody who is 7 years old off to work, protection for children from, by labor laws, things like Social Security, etc. So he was looking at the world before that came along. I just want to impress on that, because a lot of modern eyes read his work and go, oh my gosh, what a wet blanket. So Veblen really focused on the wealth of capitalists, and he thought that capitalism, as he was seeing it at that time, that American way of life, he thought of it as materialistic, superficial, and predatory. Okay, so Veblen believed that society had a corrupting influence on people. And social class perpetuates capitalism because people are wasteful and use surplus goods to impress each other rather than for functional purposes. Yeah, I kind of wonder how stoic his lifestyle really was when you look at what he was espousing. And again, this is not to make any of you listening to this feel guilty or weird out by it. It's to make you step back and take a look at why we really do what we do. Okay? Why do we need a bag with the word Gucci on it? Or, are we really just concerned with getting from A to B? So we just need any vehicle that will do that, or would we be more stoked to jump into our Lamborghini in the morning as opposed to it's that that tin can that we actually own? So, or will any tin can do? So, Veblen was saying social class perpetuates capitalism because people are wasteful and use surplus goods to impress others rather than for functional purposes. It's worth reading twice there. Okay, so first of all, he pointed out, he really concentrated a lot on symbols of success that are used to gain social status. And these include conspicuous leisure, displays of time that don't involve work, such as vacations. Now realize, again, when he was alive, there was no vacation time necessarily that was, by law required of employers to provide for their employees. Okay? And there wasn't the surplus of the additional monies coming in the way there are with so many different positions and so many, there weren't a lot of programs protecting workers. So the people who went on vacation, especially those fancy vacations, where you go cross continents or to another continent, or maybe even go for a month, or summer here or winter there, that, he said, is a conspicuous display of wealth. The displays of time that don't involve work, such as vacations. Look, I don't have to work because I'm filthy rich. That's what I mean. Okay. Another symbol of success is conspicuous consumption, including luxury goods, houses, etc. So, does one couple need a 30-room mansion, in order to survive? Will that keep the rain off their heads? Yeah, it keeps the rain off your head. It also, means that you may end up hiring a whole staff of people to take care of your home far larger than the number of people actually living in it. So, living in the quote-unquote the wealthy neighborhoods, the wealthy the wealthier communities, and having the fancy house, even compared to the other people in those wealthy communities, that's conspicuous consumption. Owning fancy goods like that Lamborghini, owning lots of that conspicuous display of wealth that sometimes people don't have, and they're still, because they're trying to imitate somebody who does. Advancing to the next slide. Veblen also focused on, and again, this was part of his symbols of success and his the critique of that. Conspicuous waste. We've had conspicuous leisure, conspicuous consumption, conspicuous waste. This is displays of useless, wasteful activities. These are Veblen's words. Displays of useless, wasteful activities and spending to promote one's status, such as buying things not because they are better, but because they are more expensive. So, you know, that garment that is made by and this, when I was a kid, it blew me away that the same garment could be made in the same factory, maybe overseas, and put in a warehouse, and a designer label strapped to it, and it could be sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. And the same garment could be, you know, you after the fashion, that particular fashion or that particular designer had sold, you know, for a while, and then a new design came along, those fashions would be sold under a different label, maybe for a at a you know, discount store, or one place like the outlets that are so popular, for a fraction of the price. Same garment, same garment. It's just when it comes on the market, and even, you know, things can go out of fashion in a matter of a couple of weeks. So you know, I don't follow this the way, you know, the way I did when I was a teenager, and even then I didn't do a very good job of it. But it seemed to me those fashions go by pretty fast. So just you know, pick up a Vogue magazine, you'll see how fast those clothes go, you know, change, and what was last year's. So conspicuous waste, it involves conspicuous leisure and conspicuous consumption in some ways, but really it is kind of a culmination of all of this, which is this display of what Veblen called these useless, wasteful activities, and spending too much to promote one's status. You're not buying that bag because it's better made, or that garment because it's better made and has double stitching and it's just a better, superior product. You're buying it because it's more expensive and everybody knows it with the label on it. Okay? So according to Veblen, the avoidance of work and the pursuit of leisure activities are linked, and they create conformity among members of the leisure class. Okay, so he's accusing the aristocracy and the people who are wealthy, the rich, whether they're old money or nouveau riche, of kind of creating their own subculture of waste, and saying this is how, you know, people who are you know, part of this social class get caught in the, you know, get caught in their very own ambers, so to say. So you know, one thing I kind of like about the points he's making is, first of all, it gives, I mean, it relieves us, if we want to be, of a lot of the responsibility, because when you look at it this way, it's like, okay, wow. You start to get a little embarrassed about all the junk I have sitting around me. But on the other hand, it also shows that you know, no matter what we have, no matter how much money we have, you know, people, and this is true, people who do marriage counseling will tell you really one of the most common reasons that people argue, no matter what their socioeconomic situation, what they most commonly argue over is money. It's really very common to argue over money, no matter how much you've got. And you know, Veblen may have hit on one of the reasons for it. And Veblen said, you know, and we're not talking so much about, oh, poor little rich kid here, but you know, keep in mind, he's pointing out there are also negative consequences for the leisure class because of their avoidance of work and their wasteful lifestyles and conspicuous consumption. So they can't do a lot. They can't. What happens if you lose your dough? What happens if you lose your money? And you know, what can you do laundry? No. Can you, you know, think of all the things that if somebody was very wealthy and always paid somebody else to do, how do they suddenly, you know, if they lose what they have, or they're in a situation where they have to, you know, suddenly don't have access to resources, how do they continue on? Will they have the basic needs or the basic skills, excuse me, to perform those practical tasks. They lose the ability to perform those practical tasks. Okay? Now, one thing I really want you to consider is that when last week we talked about Marx, and I really want you to consider kind of look at a comparison between Marx and Veblen, because yes, they both saw societies divided into haves and have-nots. They were both highly critical of capitalism, the way it was certainly at that time, and still you can make an argument for there still be, although there are laws in place that it's not quite the situation that Veblen and Marx saw, at least not in the United States. And there are still problems, and don't get comfortable because things can change quickly. So when we think about Marx and Veblen, we usually think about, wow, they were both criticizing the inequality that they saw in society, but there are differences too. So Marx's, Veblen first of all thought that Marx's revolution was really unlikely, and that's a huge difference. He said there were 4 reasons for that. First of all, production is not a fixed variable in capitalism, as Marx said. That was Veblen's opinion. Production is not a fixed variable. Veblen also pointed out that machine labor replaced much of manual labor. So machine labor of the Industrial Revolution had decreased the costs to the factory owners, to those who invested. The social institutions is number 3. The social institutions that support capitalism, what Marx's the Marxist superstructure, Veblen thought they were too ingrained in society to just be overthrown. People are creatures of habit. We don't like change very much, and we don't change unless we really see a reason to do it or feel that we have to. So since we're creatures of habit, we perpetuate social institutions. Even if we're unhappy with them, we tend to, we have to get really unhappy before we're going to do something about it, especially people who just keep their noses above the water and are just surviving, just making it financially. Are these going to be the people that, upset the waters? No. That's called Tawney's metaphor. That's an old metaphor from anthropology, but that's not going to be on the quizzes or tests or anything like that. But just imagine this person standing there with their nose just above the water. They can't afford to agitate the water or they will drown. They're just making it by paycheck to paycheck. Now, if leaders come along like government and raise the water level, that person has nothing to lose. And yes, that's when the people with the least fight those with the most. But very often it's the people who are in the middle class who start those revolutions, or in thought at least, in concept, not necessarily physical attacks and that sort of thing, but can be protesting or sit-ins and that sort of thing. Okay. Number 4, Veblen said captains of industry are the American aristocracy. Okay, we don't have kings. We have Kennedys, and they are not only unfettered by the U.S. government, they are laying claim to more and more of the world's resources, operating outside of government control. They have high status, and therefore people take what they say seriously. Now, remember, Veblen is proposing this really before these international organizations, these international corporations, were nearly as prevalent as they are today. So when I read that, I always think, my gosh, he was practically predicting the future. Okay, so that is what I wanted to present this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's readings. You'll read more about Veblen and about Freud. And I sincerely hope you will post your questions on the virtual office, also the Ask the Professor a Question page, but you can also post your thoughts about these theories, about the theorists. Keep in mind you have your discussion boards as well, and in your responses to each other, you can talk about examples. Not the answers themselves should be objective and well researched, but the responses to each other, you can say, oh my gosh, this hit home because I was thinking of this. So in your responses, you can talk conversationally and about personal and personal examples. Okay, so I hope that you will become interested in this and want to discuss it as a group. You can jump into the virtual office or do that through through your weekly discussion boards. Have an absolutely wonderful week 4. Thank you so much for attending these lectures, and I hope that you have a very nice time attending National University. If I do not see you in a future class, I hope all your career dreams come true. And even if I do see you in a future class, I hope all your career dreams come true. Thank you so much. Have a very, very nice week. Bye-bye.